Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Come on, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Time to wake up. I know ESG was a very boring topic and we had a very average moderator doing that session. Where is he? You can make some comparative analysis. How did this panel versus that panel? Don't compare me to him. All right? So is everybody okay now? Did we wake up? Anybody sleeping? Please put your hand up. Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is the ACFI Conclave 2025. It doesn't get bigger than this at ACFI. We are also delighted to be here, and thank you very much for staying up and holding up to this panel. We'll get to the topic because I've been told that I can only talk 1 hour, which means the panel will get 30 minutes in total. Yeah, so I'll straight away get on to the topic that we are going to talk about today. Ladies and gentlemen, as we dwell upon the journey of getting to 10 million tons, which actually started a couple of years ago, and we saw a little bit of twist on it from our Mr. Piyush Srivastava this morning. But let me tell you, the 10 million ton target is very much on, and ACFI has definitely dawned it on itself to make sure that we get there. The only question is by when. Now, when we look at getting on to that 10 million tons, what we need to look at is that growth safeguarded? And how are we actually going to safeguard that growth? So 3 critical elements is what this panel, this lovely, amazing panel is going to talk about. And we'll try and bring about few key elements which we'll hope will be enriching for you and for your businesses. Because as we plan this 10 million ton journey for the Indian air cargo space, we definitely do not want to take any step back at any stage due to the fact that either we were not compliant or we did not measure our risk and we did not end up creating a resilient business. So we are definitely here to discuss these critical points, and I will talk less and I will get down straight away to asking this amazing panel that I have, where I have a veteran from 19th century? 18th century. Mr. Bala, and a very sizable industry expert, Dr. Ravi Mathur, a very avid shipper who's brought about a lot of positive changes to the logistics industry. We have Kiran, the lovely lady right in the center of this panel. Thank God I have a lady on my panel. Kiran, thank you. And who's developing one of the most modern airports of India. Just round the corner, the opening. We are all excitedly looking forward to it. We have Giri, one of the most exciting airlines from the Middle East, Etihad. And we have somebody from the financial world, who's probably a risk expert and brings in huge amount of experience from the insurance side. So I really prompt all of you to give a lot of attention to what all aspects this lovely panel will bring about, because I'm sure there are certain elements that you will need to go back and look into your own businesses and explore how you will make your own business extremely resilient. Let me start with the lady. I'm sorry, I'm not going to follow left to right, right to left, but I only love women, so I'm going to start with the lady. You're building a great airport, an airport which everybody is looking forward to coming up. There's a lot of excitement in the air, and I'm sure when you build a large infra like an airport, you do all the 3 things. You measure the risk, you create a compliant infrastructure, a compliant ecosystem, and you make sure that the business is extremely, extremely resilient, especially by design. Let me open this with you, and do you want to share some thoughts as to how you think the Indian airports or the entire Indian ecosystem, air cargo ecosystem, should look at all 3 aspects?
Sure. First of all, good evening to all of you. It's really nice to meet some long lost friends. I've been in this industry long enough to have some very specific, very personal, very experienced views on how design really matters when it comes to any sort of airport infrastructure. I do know that at the moment we're going to be concentrating more on cargo. So I will speak a little bit about cargo design. Most of the airports in the world were essentially designed for packages which talk, which are passengers. We forgot about the packages that don't talk, and a lot of the airports actually never had the opportunity to design multimodal cargo hubs which were focused on cargo movement. No fault, it is just an evolutionary thing and it happens over time. In our case, because we're a greenfield, we actually had the opportunity to do both. Now, why do I say this? Everything we've spoken about, whether it has to do with sustainability, whether it has to do with compliance, whether it has to do with risk management, actually finds its root in design. And I say this very confidently, simply because at the end of the day, what do you need to do? You need to make sure that a package is delivered from end to end safely and securely. And that cannot happen if there is any crisscrossing, if there is airside infrastructure which has not been designed to allow for quick turnarounds, if the regulator has not agreed to the design that you have proposed. So none of this can actually happen. And what ends up happening is that we start the process of gaining the commercial business, but we don't realize all the congestion, all the blocks that are caused along the way, and we try and find solutions as we are trying to commercialize and as we are trying to do the business. All that does is delay progress. Something as simple as making sure that the access of your passenger traffic and the access of your logistics traffic has to be divided. You cannot have them entering in and out of the airport in the same space. Something as simple as making sure that your master plan is divided in a way where you have an industrial cantonment and you have a passenger services cantonment. It should be divided. The other reason for this is simply that the kind of MEP or the kind of power that is required on one side is not essentially the same that is required on the other side. Now, I don't want to get into the specifics of how this is calculated, but with the huge pressure, for example, of EV, right? Everything needs to be EV, not just anything on the air side in terms of vehicular movement, but even the equipment that is being used inside. Your terminals need to be designed to accommodate that. You cannot just put them in terminals that already exist, because you will cause the congestion. When you work with your regulator, for example, the regulator has all the right rules, but how do those rules actually exercise themselves in your space? Many a time you will notice they are actually in the way of your progress. And the reason they're in the way is because you did not think of where this customs officer or where this immigration or where this inspector needs to sit. He's in the way of that movement because you did not think. So what we have done is, here at Noida International Airport, and I welcome some of you to come and see it along with our partners, AISATs, we have actually designed a 5-layer approach. Everything from how you dock in, how you turn around, the width of the gates, how those gates are covered so that they are protected from bad weather, something as simple as that, to making sure that the X-rays are put into pits so you use less forklifts, which add to the destruction of your terminal. So, I do feel that it is absolutely critical that we start thinking on the route first. And that route, in my opinion, is actually the design of these spaces. And after that, all these other things that we want to do will fall into place beautifully, intuitively, and effectively.
Thank you, Kiran. I think it's a very fair point. I'm going to be at your back, guys. So it's a very fair point when she speaks about the design part of it. If you don't do your planning well, if you don't design well, what you will get eventually may not be what the business actually needs. And in today's modern world, you have great amount of information, data, you have lots of good practices from around the world, which some of the greenfield airports can pick up and implement. And I'm sure looking at those greenfield implementations, there would be some things that the other airports can also pick up and probably implement. Ladies and gentlemen, in this very, very uncertain world that we have for the last 20 odd years, I think ever since 9/11 happened, the world's never been certain. And every few months we hear something new, There's some kind of a crisis. Even if a Houthi throws a bomb at a ship in a Suez Canal, it blocks almost 20% of global trade. And from the Suez Canal, the ships have to go down on the Cape of Good Hope, hoping to get to their destination soon. But that doesn't happen. Suddenly, one country in the world, one major economy of the world wants to bring about tariffs. And that disrupts businesses. And when those disruptions happen, we see airlines having a bit of a challenge. How do you redeploy your capacities? How do you suddenly pick up a few of your freighters and put them in different markets, hoping that those markets will be able to generate the same amount of business? Because obviously the capacity that was bought in with a lot of thought, a lot of plans. So Giri, I will throw this to you. I mean, how do you look at, as an airline on the risk side, you may not have to just cover this piece, but how do you look at, from an airline perspective, risk compliance as well as creating a resilient routes?
Thank you, Raj. First of all, good evening to everyone. See, I mean, if you look at, Etihad as a airlines, it's been 20 years, and we recently celebrated a 20th anniversary. And if you look at, India as a market, currently we fly 11 airports, and we have 32 departures a day. Sizable cargo capacities available. And with regards to your question, see, it's a very tough situation, right? And suddenly, if there is any uncertainty, we earlier, we used to have a plan B. Today, you need to have plan C and plan D also. And the network capacity team find it really, really tough. And currently, the model what we work is, we anticipate based on the geopolitical situations. And the route is designed in terms, if there is any disruptions. We kind of, activate the plan B and plan C in terms of, how do we ensure, the supply chain is not affected. Recently, that incident, the Iran and USA, the service is disrupted for about 1 day. So we all worked out a backup plan in terms of, how do we ensure, and then the teams are actively involved. And we ensured that, the service is back on the same day. So it's a tough job, honestly saying, it's a tough environment, but the teams are ready now. Along with the technology, we were able to come up, very quickly. Yeah.
Interesting. So I'll give some food for thought on this topic that, today airlines have multiple carriers under their wings. They operate from different hubs. Although still, a lot of those airlines that are acquired by some of the major carriers still operate individually, and they operate out of individual hubs. I think in order to create a resilient supply chain, I think maybe at some stage, the airlines also look at this aspect that if their mother hub, which is your home country, probably gets into a situation which we just saw, how do you pivot into another market and that becomes your mother hub, at least for the next, 24 hours, 48 hours, or till the time. I think it's something that the carriers need to see, because ultimately, we can have the best airports in the world, we can have the best freight forwarders, we can have whoever, but if the airlines don't operate, there's nothing that will move, right? So we need you to be in operation. So resilience, I think in terms of that, I think the carriers need to look at this as well, that if in case there is a big disruption at their home turf, what happens next? Now, I'll go over to the shipper, because, I mean, ultimately, you are the main person for who all of us are trying to create the infrastructure, we're trying to create all the processes. So how do you see how risk averse is our industry actually? How do you see from a customer perspective the kind of risks, the kind of compliances that you think that the industry must have, and what from a customer perspective do you think is that we need to do to become more resilient for the future?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question, and something I wanted to actually address, at this prestigious forum. But I'll just take a step back first. Unlike the previous, panel that was discussing about sustainability and carbon emission, there is a lot of international guidelines and frameworks which are available under which you can work. So to start with, you have the United Nations Conference on Climate Change, under which you have the Paris Convention that we heard about. Then you have the Kyoto Protocol, that governs the Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 emission. Now, when it comes to supply chain resilience, unfortunately, there's no one single overarching convention or, effort that is going on globally under which, you can all position yourself and then, measure your success or failure for that, Having said that, there is work still going on. For example, there is the Indo-Pacific Economic Cooperation, for which India is a signatory among 14 13 other countries, 14 in all. There is a World Custom Organization, there is a custom industry resilience forum on supply chain. So they are there, the work is happening. I think we need to, when we in a forum like this and where you have multiple stakeholders, we need to calibrate our effort as to what the international community's response has been to the disruptions which you mentioned earlier in your question, and IPEF is one of the responses that came from the, from the international community to manage disruptions like the Red Sea or, the different geopolitical disruptions that are going on. So that having set the framework on which I'll, express further, organizations or firms, they can have their own strategies for resilience, risk management or contingency planning, but when it comes to an industry like air cargo, there are multiple partners to it. There's a handover of goods and information at multiple stages. So there, the concept of resilience becomes all the more complex. Then how do you build the buffers between various parties, such as the shipper and the airport authority, various custodians, airlines, etc., to absorb the shocks that are coming from the environment. So I think that is the challenge we have to think about. I'll pick it up in the subsequent part of the discussion in case I get a chance. But so the basic point is calibrate the effort with reference to an overarching guidance that is coming from the international, conventions and regulations. Yeah.
It's a very fair point. The international conventions, international bodies, and we all get governed by many of these, whether it is IATA, WCO, ICAO, various other bodies who have been creating these frameworks under which the goods move across the world. But ultimately, everything that happens has to be in the interest of the customer, because ultimately we all get paid when we move goods seamlessly, effectively in time. Balaji, I think he's touched a very, very specific point of all the organizations around the world, and I think you can talk 1 hour on each organization, but I will give you only 3-4 minutes.
I do not want bricks to be thrown at me. I would rather be safe with both the legs working, both the hands working, go away. On a serious note, I think Dr. Mathur brought us to a very, very important point in terms of how international regulations and framework helps the trade and helps you to be compliant. I will wear a little bit of my instructor hat on hand because I was born an instructor there. What is compliance? What is conformance? Quiz time for all the people because tea and coffee have been given already. What is compliance? What is conformance? Can anybody? Deathly silence? Pin drop silence?
Somebody call a friend, Shashi Tharoor.
Yeah, exactly. You can phone a friend or a 50-50. No, on a serious note, conformance is something which is nothing to do with regulations. It is created by you and your organization. Within your organization, you write something, this is the way I do business, and you stick to it. That is conformance. Compliance is something connected with regulatory authorities. When Government of India, United Nations, ICAO, of course it is implemented by Government of India through DGCA, when they write, that becomes compliance. Compliance costs money. So the point raised by Yash is more important, that the person writing the compliance laws do not stay in an ivory tower without even looking into what the industry wants or what is good for the whole industry. They cannot write. We had two very encouraging statements this morning. One from, I think, Mr. Rasogi, Customs, and the other one from Mr. Piyush Srivastava, both representing the regulatory authorities. We do not tell the industry this is the better way of doing business. We come and ask you which one. That is indeed encouraging, and that happens even at the highest level in United Nations ICAO. I've been extremely blessed to be part of that for the past about 3 decades, because Yash ensured that the whole audience knows I am from 18th century. I don't mind repeating it. So I've been part of that for more than 30 years in terms of how rules are written. You wouldn't believe, not a single rule or a regulation gets written at ICAO unless the subject specialist organizations and academicians are brought, asked to validate, and then only it gets done. Still, it is WIP, work in progress. There is nothing as a final full stop. It is always a comma. Why? New methods can come. New innovations take place. New research comes, brings new information there. So accordingly, I'll just give you one example. Dry ice, have you all heard about it? Yes or no? Thank you. You really had a cup of tea and coffee. Thank you. And that is carbon dioxide solid, as you know. The way the regulations were written and conceived in 1980s and 90s had a set of data which was tried to be validated later, whether it really poses the type of danger and problems to the human beings when you open the cargo hold of an aircraft, whether if you carry it in a pallet or a container, does it really create a problem when you open those containers. So there were some information available, and based on that, regulations were written in 1980. I was privy to what I am going to tell you. In 2000, we completely changed it. We engaged 2 universities, did a lot of research. UPS, I saw the UPS gentleman today, and I was in Emirates at that time. We both did a lot of research, and we proved that those were not based on scientific information. When you carry dry ice by pellets or dry ice as, thistles, or there are so many forms in which you can carry it as blocks. So then the regulations itself were rewritten. You know which were the 2 companies which were very happy and worked with us very closely? You would have heard their names, Boeing and Airbus. We worked with them very closely, they worked with us very closely, and completely changed. So please note, law, regulations doesn't mean they are static. They are dynamic, based on facts, based on experiments, based on research, based on the findings finally. And for that, one or two of me, we all have to roll our sleeves, and we need to get down to that. We can't just leave it to say, somebody will do some research somewhere, that somebody is you, it is me, it is him, it is her, everybody. So that is the way industry evolves. That is on compliance part of it. I'll come to another side of compliance. Kiran went very nicely about infrastructure compliance. That's right, Kiran? That's the way you do. I'm going to now talk about transportation compliance. We'll go a little bit. If infrastructure compliance is not facilitated, transport compliance becomes a problem, very clearly. So that's the first step. Second step. You all have heard of something which all of you know in this room, dangerous goods regulations, right? By the way, that came into ICAO from IATA level on 31st December 1982. I was one of the fortunate people to be certified on that day. So I've been there from that day. So if he calls me Dinosaurus, I am right. I am Dinosaurus. I was there when probably British were ruling India. Right. Now coming to the reality part of it, on a serious note, dangerous goods compliance have taken a new, very serious compliance framework level by Government of India, DGCA. How many of you are aware of it? The levels of, yeah, I see quite a few hands going up. The levels of inspection, the levels of compliance norms, and the levels of consequences for non-compliance, they are all going to go up. Let me make a point very clear. The idea is not to fine you and me, make 20 rupees extra or 2,000 rupees extra for Government of India coffers. No. The idea is to get you and me do the job right the first time, and no repetition. That is the one. So the levels of professionalism in our country has got to go. Because we have got a great Hindi word. We use it often in everyday's life. Chalta hai. वो चलता है नहीं चलेगा. That doesn't work in safety compliance. We need to be conscious of what we are doing. Very unfortunately, we had a recent incident there. Reasons may be very different. You don't want an aircraft to go down. You don't want lives to be lost just because of somebody was, sorry to use the correct English word, stupid enough not to be compliant. So we have, all of us industry leaders sitting in this room, we carry a large amount of responsibility in our shoulders to ensure compliance. It could be in dangerous goods, it could be in aircraft safety, it could be in any part of it there. A person like Kiran and her company and all, they work, they sweat and create a very compliant infrastructure. You and I can't use it by being compliant on the aircraft. That is where the problem is. As he said, you can give me another 15 days and I'll give you a lecture on that, but I'll shut up.
Thank you, Bala. Thank you, Ji. Some very, very strong and important points he made there, because, you know, compliance is not just about checking and testing, because once an aircraft is in the air, if you try and test it in live situation, it could mean lives. Not just in the air, but, you know, even if there's a fall on the ground.
Lives of not alone the aircraft, sorry to interrupt there.
On the ground.
Lives are also on the ground.
That's
exactly.
what I said, on the ground as well. So it's very important to, you know, create a very compliant ecosystem, and ICAO has been doing a great work in trying to create that framework. I'll just change the topic a little bit, come to you, Faiz, because, you know, you're obviously sitting on the risk side, insurances, etc. So you measure risk every day, because at the end of the day, when you want to command a premium from one of your customers, you definitely raise the bar of the risk, right, to show that there is extra risk, which is why you need to pay extra premium. So I'm sure there is a lot of, you do look at the compliances and you do look at the frameworks in which your customers work. And I'm sure you've done the same at airports, airlines, freight forwarders, custom brokers, truckers, etc. The entire logistics ecosystem. So how do you see us from the outside?
Yeah, so thank you so much. My name is Faiz, and it's absolutely a pleasure to be a part of such conference and such you know, prestigious forum. So I have a slightly different view, because obviously I come from a different background altogether, and as sir mentioned, I'm being very fortunate to analyze all this risk very closely, because as he rightly mentioned, insurance is a very, very integral part, and it touches the entire ecosystem in totality, right? Whether we talk about constructing the airport, which is the ground one, the first phase that we're talking about, or we talk about handling a cargo, or we talk about, let's say, shipping as an industry, or for example, aviation holistically as an industry also. So the subject line that I cater, fortunately, touches the entire ecosystem in very detailed manner, right? Because obviously when we inspect the risk or we analyze the risk, at our part, it becomes a very moral responsibility to educate the customer, to educate the people, to educate the industry as a whole. What is something which will strike you, correct? And what is the highest probability of a particular operation or particular problem statement triggering, and how can it trigger, right? So that is how we analyze when we do this entire risk management cohort, right? And before joining here, I was just going through the entire numbers. I think the aviation cargo industry holistically caters to about 3.66 million tons of cargo by 23-24 numbers that I was privy of. And obviously it's a humongous number that we have taken, a 10 million ton of overall cargo movement that we are talking about. So it's very clear the CAGR is going to be more than 11% thereafter, because we're talking about 2033 numbers that we envisage, right? So as we grow in shape and size, I'm sure everybody sitting in this conference room, the businesses will boom, they will grow, they will have a different trajectory altogether, because obviously the industry as a whole will move to a different trajectory. So as we move on to a different trajectory, are we envisaging the risk to increase? The answer is yes. It is very, very pertinent and inherent about this risk, which is this industry as a whole, when things will move in a different direction, the automatically liabilities associated with these industries, the risk associated with the industries will take its own shape and size, right? Will current risk management practices suffice and will help us? The answer is no, correct? We're talking about 10 times of the industry moving in, and we're talking about the risk remaining the same. The answer is no. Obviously, there are a lot of things that probably we have to get into details to understand, whether you're talking about shipping movement. Obviously, sir mentioned about Houthi example, the Red Sea example. Understand somebody's cargo who is in that particular zone, and he is completely clueless what is happening to it, right? Unless you have taken a due precautions, or probably you have insured yourself holistically, you are absolutely at the mercy of what happens to God, because nothing else is there in your control. Now, tomorrow, if you want to really change your business model, change your country of operation, do we have the trust on the buyer that we are talking to? The answer is no, right? So can we have a credit policies or the credit exposures covered anyhow, which can help us still taking those calls and increasing the businesses despite of the fact that things have gotten into turbulence, right? That is point number one. A very critical element when we talk about aviation cargo is when the people in a various industry are at the airport handling various kinds of operation, whether it is cargo, movement operations, logistic operations, right, catering operations, and so on and so forth. So all these liabilities take a very different tangent when we talk about in terms of aviation, because obviously the amount of liability that can arise, the amount of trigger that can arise can be beyond our imaginations. So there are a couple of things that we do as an industry, right? The first and the foremost important thing is, basis the sector that you operate, right? We do the entire detailed risk analysis, and then we submit a report which tells you, okay, what are the open areas of things that we can be, susceptible of, right? Can we mitigate that? The answer is yes, because they are experts doing it. We also have an experience of almost 25 years doing it. So we know what is important, where we have seen, catastrophes happening, we have seen trigger points happening, right? Can we mitigate? The answer is yes. But can it be 100% safe? The answer is no. After mitigation also, there has to be a coverage in place. There has to be a layer of protection in place. God forbid, even after the best of the precautions can lead to a problem statement happening, then we should be still safeguarded by the layer, which is obviously insurance in this sector. And fortunately, now the Indian market is very evolved. Unlike the previous time where probably we talk about people taking policies from US, people taking policies from UK market. Now I think fortunately we are at a very different level altogether, right? Every single coverage you can think of is available in the country to safeguard the interest of the industry as a whole. So that was my limited point I want to make because my subject is slightly tricky. I don't want to bore people too much on it. But yes, that's how I wanted to give a perspective to all of you. Thank you.
So Faiz, very interesting points that you took up with liability, credit, etc. If I want to ask you, when you look at our industry, air cargo or aviation, what is that element of risk that you think, always runs into your mind that, okay, this as an element, this industry needs to solve collectively? Because you're sitting outside, and your perspective is important for us, important for ACFI, because we can work on those aspects that you probably want to. So that one, just one.
So fortunately, I got the opportunity to meet the DGCA a couple of some other context, so exactly where this is.
Hello?
There are risks which is now a new age risk, right? And it is evolving like anything. For example, if I ask somebody maybe 5 years down the line or 10 years down the line, would cyber be a risk? Anybody would have a question, cyber, this is complete, cyber kya hota hai? But today, if you ask me in any single context, the cyber liability is the biggest risk in any industry which is now doing. Right? Whether we talk about shipping, we talk about cargo, we talk about aviation sector, that is one of the biggest liability that is taken. Right? And still people do not have answer how to resolve it, because it's not a very frequency driven episode which happens, right? Aisa nahi hoga, you will find every single day cyber claim happening. But my guarantee to all of you sitting in the room, if every day you read a newspaper, you find one cyber attack happening in somebody or other sector, somewhere or other, right? So that is one sector which I feel is now taking a huge liability as an industry. And I'm honestly, I can confess that to all of you, people are taking India as the most susceptible market in terms of cyber threats and cyber liabilities occurring. Second, I'll just take a minute more. I think warehousing solutions now are again a big exposure that we are talking about. We're talking about dark stores, we are talking about cargo handling warehouses, big warehouses, different shapes and sizes. Now, in a haste of increasing our business model, obviously we all want to passionately grow our businesses, but then at the end of the day, we should be very, very clear what kind of risk mitigation we are doing when we are taking a warehouse or when we are constructing a warehouse or when we are storing cargo, right? That again is now a very different kind of a thought process altogether. So my request to all of you is whenever you are doing such expansions, you should always keep that risk in mind before expanding businesses, because at the end of the day, that risk can pull you back to several years, right, if you're not cognizant of it. So that was
can I just take you deeper into this topic just for a quick 30 seconds? I mean, when you talk about warehouses, dark stores, etc., of moving goods, is it the product efficacy you're talking about, or is it the product getting lost that one needs to be watchful of when you talk about risk?
So I think when you talk about lost product, definitely that is not, that is obviously a risk that is involved, but I'm saying that is not, as a quantification of that risk is not that huge among us, right? It might be in minuscules, right, relatively. But when you talk about warehouse storage as a category, right, the safety hazard that it carries is humongous. I don't know how many people read that news. Just a week back, there's a factory which got gutted. It was a chemical factory with a warehouse. There were 33 casualties and the entire 100 crore factory got gutted at its end, right? Now, the business loss obviously stands true because the factory got gutted, now it is no more. The financial loss associated, which is loss of profit that he was supposed to make, also got, carried away with it. Secondly, there were 33 casualties, which again is a third-party liability which is happening. So imagine the quantum, when a factory can have so much of a quantum, imagine what the warehouse can have, right? So that it is inherent problem statement, inherent risk which is associated with a sector like warehouse. Shipping certainly is susceptible more to cargo logistic because obviously there are a lot of embargoes happening, ships getting, like Houthi attacks and Red Seas and all that stuff happening. So obviously the cargo on the logistics side has a different tangent, but warehousing has a different risk altogether.
Thank you, Faiz. Two very important points what he pointed out now. One is of the storage piece, and it obviously, I'll take you on this, Kiran, right after this, that today we've seen what happened at one of the Iran ports. We saw something that happened in Israel port. We've seen these things happening at some of the Chinese airports with regard to products, and how sometimes the warehouse operators or the entire ecosystem becomes susceptible of not measuring what kind of product comes in, leading to, like he said, business losses, financial losses, as well as lives. Very fair point. I will come to you on that. The second point what he spoke about is on the cyber piece. Today we're talking all about technology, integrating end to end, right from the shipper to the buyer, every stakeholder in between. So it's not just necessarily one business that possibly when you talk about API integrations, you also talk about the risk that you carry across stakeholders. It's not just your company, you could affect the other company. So I think cyber as a risk obviously is very genuine, and I would really prompt ACFI to look at this piece and maybe create a knowledge pillar, maybe a small subgroup, KEKU can be looked at in the knowledge pillar on the cyber piece. Because it's like he said, and India stands at one of the highest levels. So, we definitely don't want to pay higher premiums. We don't want to make more money for ICICI. We want to make sure that our industry. So Kiran, coming to you, how do you look at this piece and you're building a ground up facility. So how do you think, how have you probably analyzed this risk and probably created a resilient airport?
So, this is just not the airport operator's problem. So there is one part of it which is regulated, right? So there are certain compliances that we have to abide by. And if you actually go through those compliances, you will realize that at any given moment, they're as accurate or as strict as they could possibly be, given what is known within that environment. So yeah, absolutely. As an airport operator, you make sure that all your partners are also able to give you that credibility. A lot of them are sitting here and they do know the kind of compliances we ask for, and we do receive them. We actually get them audited as well. But, Yash, my bigger fear is the unknown. And that unknown happens to occur almost every few minutes. And how prepared are we for that, right? In fact, what I would encourage is an organization like the ACFI, for example. These regulations there's so many and they're so in-depth. Some of them might even be a little outdated. And I would encourage, you being the ex-president with even Sanjeev, this is something that we should all take on and actually go through it very carefully, because suddenly, because these boxes don't talk, because we have issues when customs looks at every single package, because it adds to the delay, it adds to a commercial downturn, we suddenly start making compromises. Now, is there technology available that can make sure that these compromises get addressed? I don't know, because in all of my experience, I can tell you that most of the time, it's the eyes, the ears, the hands, and the feet of the working body that recognizes that something has gone wrong. Because by the time the technology data gets captured, which is instant, but by the time it gets analyzed and translated, that half a second is too late. So my problem is the unknown.
Yeah.
I'm very confident with the known.
I really feel you, and I'll give you an episode very quickly. There was this shipper we handled once in one of the airports, and there was a small 50, 100 kilo shipment which was moved to the airport, and the invoice and the packing list said construction material, all right? And what lands at the airport are drums of Fevicol, all right? No DG declared, nothing. It has full signs of highly inflammable on it. And we called the shipper because the terminal raised the issue, and it was raised to the airline, etc., etc., and obviously the freight forwarder gets blamed. But when we call the shipper and we say, what have you sent? Do you know it's DG? He said, no, it's only Fevicol. All right? So the fear of the unknown, and this is where I think, ACFI has been playing a critical role over the last few years, where we are thinking that, certification is one part of business, but it's awareness at the ground level. The person who was picking up that consignment, that trucker who was picking up that consignment there, if that person was aware, just to have a look at what he's picking up, and write on the big boxes, big, with the skull, highly inflammable, and the person could bring it to the airport. So no, nothing gets raised. So I will go on to the shipper, because ultimately everything starts with you. And I'm sure that, the shippers need their product to get to the final destination in the safest way. So they will pack it well, they will move it well. Sir, your thoughts on this?
Thanks. And I'll build on both the points that Faiz mentioned and Kiran said, So risk is one part of it, and I would consider it an easier part, because, when you're dealing with the known, you can kind of put a value to it, you can measure and, put a number as to the extent of the risk, and you can also put a monetary value as to how to mitigate that risk. The other point, that Kiran mentioned is about the unknown. I'd like to kind of break it into two. There's a known unknown, and there is an unknown unknown. For what you do not know, you can still have a contingency planning, So you can, when you have a contingency plan, there are three things, you probably need to think about, that in case a disruption happens, and you don't know what kind of disruption happens, but you should be able to assess the ability of your organization to recover back. So time to recover. And how much time is left for you to serve? So for example, the disruption and you're running out of inventory. So how much time you have to survive? And if you know, for example, that this thing is going to hit us, then you also need to have the time to impact. At some point of time, a disruption has happened, but it's not impacted you, immediately. So the time to recover, time to survive, time to impact, these are three things, you need to be aware of, when you're talking of known unknowns and unknown unknowns. The last part is that, there is a systemic resilience that needs to be built into the systems to absorb these shocks, So good practices I would say, fall under that category. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, sir. The known and the unknown. Beautiful. Balaji, I
think Dr. Ravi Mathur is my best friend. He leads me to a point which I wanted to make. Thank you, Dr. Saab. I'll tell you.
But I didn't ask the question.
You didn't. I don't have to ask the question because I'll continue on that, if you don't mind. People we have seen driving to the next state to take advantage of the petrol price. Now take that as, take advantage, because you go and fill it up and come back, type of. Take that now into a very serious level international problem. Which has got direct problem with the dangerous goods, compliance and everything. Gold refining is a very big business in Khartoum, Sudan. For that, one of the most important raw materials you need is mercury. Mercury is a dangerous goods, every one of us in this room knows. So it needs to be accepted in specific quantities, it needs to be comply with many regulations, it has got to be supported by documentation, the whole lot of it. I am not YK Goyal or Balasubramaniam to conduct a DG program, but I'll stop there. Now, this market situation of China having very cheap mercury encouraged every trader to procure mercury only from there and transport it across to Khartoum. In that, the bottles which can carry mercury very safely internationally at that time, I'm talking about 10 years back, costed $75 per container of a particular size. they were able to get it at $4.50 per container. So, carrying mercury undeclared as spare parts, blah, 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 across was the norm, not the exception. Very unfortunately, I was in Emirates at that time. We Emirates got into a problem where one of our aircraft had to be grounded in Dubai and for 41 full days to see all the corrosion of the plane. And very unfortunately, after a few days, one of the Qatar Airways plane also got caught in that problem. So they faced the music in Doha. So with the result, I literally camped in Hong Kong with the Civil Aviation Authority and the other authorities there and also the chemical councils there to ensure that this problem is completely sorted out. There were lots of refinements made in the regulation, in compliance measures, in inspection, the whole lot of it completely. And then for a few days it started going in baggage. That was also found out. And then finally the whole thing has been almost stopped. I mean, nowadays you don't hear about it. What I'm saying is compliance can even be from known source. You talked about, Dr. Saab. It could be many, many things. There is never something called, yes, I have got all the regulations, I've got all my inspections. You cannot sit tight, quiet, happy. Never. Every moment you are on the treadmill. If you do not run at a particular speed, you trip down. That is the way the airline industry, safety industry is. And safety is everyone's responsibility. One of my bosses used to say, I think we should never have a safety department. Everybody raised their eyes. What the hell are you talking? Because if I have a safety department, people indirectly think only these 6 chaps have got to look after the safety. They think all other 94 people can sit quiet, not bother about safety. I thought he made a brilliant statement there. Safety is your responsibility, my responsibility, your responsibility, everybody's responsibility. That is how the laws are always evolving, regulation compliances are evolving, so that we don't have to make FIs more richer, we can make FIs a little bit poorer. With all good due respect to you, FIs.
Faiz, sir, I have mine. So, Faiz, you need to watch out, huh? Everybody is after you. So, I think, it's obviously safety is everybody's responsibility. We definitely know this and we cannot shy away from it. And I think what's important is that what I was talking about, creating awareness programs and what we are doing, I think going right down to the shipper level and creating some of these awareness
Good outreach basically.
Outreach, yeah, of course. It's important because to sensitize people. It's not that sometimes people do this purposely, intentionally, but what we just spoke, unknown. I do not know and I don't actually assess what is probably the outcome of something like this happening. Like that gentleman who said, it's only Fevicol. How does it matter? So, if mercury was moving instead of for $75 on a $4 box or whatever, it's obviously, putting everybody's to risk, and then it moved to a baggage and today it's not known. So I assume it's going fine. I hope so too. Giri, I want to just get your mind as the last one on this round. From the carrier perspective, you are the most at risk, right? You have the aircrafts in the air, something goes wrong, everybody just points their fingers to you, that you didn't do your checks right, you didn't do your balances right. How do you, for the airline, it must be like a 24-hour nightmare to manage risk.
Yeah, Asha, it's a great question. I think, so if you look at, Etihad, recently in the Air Cargo Munich, we launched a new device. It's called a Smart Track. I'm just carrying it so that I can show to people. It's like a label powered by your IoT-based solutions and cloud technology, and it completely gives you a 360 degrees visibility. So the moment you remove the tag and paste it in the box or ULD.
Only box, right? Not people, not husbands, not.
If you want to do that, you can do that. You're safe. So the moment you paste it in the carton box or ULDs or whatever, and then you scan the barcode, it's activated. It gives you a trigger every 30 minutes, and it comes with a lot of different added features. For example, if the shipment is tilted, you get an alert, and if the shipment is exposed to the temperature, you get an alert, and also you can track the shipment even if it's on the flight. So that's the technology we recently launched. a couple of weeks back, and currently it's on a trial. And also how it works, we have a control tower. It not only gives the visibility to the shipper, it gives the visibility to the airlines and the operation team. The moment, the package is, let's say there's an issue with the package, right? I mean, if it's exposed to the high temperature or whatever, immediately we get a trigger, and ops team is notified, and then we will immediately call up the ramp or GHA, or whoever is it, and then we will tell them what needs to be done. So immediately the risk is mitigated.
Great.
So
I think it's still, I really love the product because, in today's world, I'm sure Raviji, it's music to his ears, and many other shippers who might be here, that, if you can actually know where exactly your product is probably at every 30 minutes.
Absolutely.
And even in the air, I assume, right? It's
Absolutely.
even if the aircraft is in the air. So it's a great product to have. I still feel it's something that once you get the product, then you label it. So what I'm trying to just understand is how do we mitigate risk right from the outset? So I'm going to just get on the floor because, they've been great audience. Keku only gave them 2 minutes, to answer some questions. I want to give them 7. So, ladies and gentlemen, you have an extremely knowledgeable panel here. I would like you to ask some questions. You've been sitting here since the morning. Please come up, identify yourself, and ask your question. So I'm going to get on the tech piece. I mean, staying with the gadget that you just showed us. I mean, how do we see technology helping us in preempting a possible risk, because safety is better than cure. We don't want to end up identifying a risk once it's there. So how do you see, let me again start with you, Kiran. Quick, 60 seconds, each one of you. How do you see technology probably playing a role, or is it IoT, maybe some of these gadgets like what he showed us?
No, like I said before, gadgets are good, technology is wonderful, but what you do with all this big data is actually the problem that needs to be addressed. And I do not think we as a race are at that level where we can completely master predictability. It's in very small pockets, but majority of life and living is unpredictable still.
Great. Raviji?
Yeah, I'll add to that. I mean, that's a, I think, great closing question probably for this panel. And I'll bring in everybody's favorite topic, which is artificial intelligence, to this particular context. Some of the most popular or most adopted use cases for artificial intelligence use are anomaly detection, fraud detection, prediction, and early alerts. So, so if you use these use cases in your areas of business, whichever part of the cargo industry you represent, anomaly detection and fraud detection, I think, will go a long way in solving, some of the questions that we addressed today about known unknowns and unknown unknowns. That would be my plan.
Great, yeah. I mean, some of the tools that you've spoken about definitely help us, and I agree also to a large extent, Kiran, that unless you bring in the human element, not everything can be left to technology, not everything can be left in that case that I just told you. So how did we mitigate our risk? So when an airway gets executed now in our system, so there are these commodities, the moment they show up, so construction material was immediately added to that. We didn't add Fevicol because Fevicol was never mentioned. We added construction material as a double check. So once a product like this gets into the system and somebody is trying to execute an airway bill, so it automatically gets to another desk where a second layer of verification needs to be done before the practical execution happens.
I mean, just one more thing, Yash. I think, I've spent 5-6 years now building this airport, and there is this one thing where, we are sort of using technology as an excuse for something that I forgot because it didn't trigger. We should stop that because AI, etc., is making us dumber. And I honestly feel that we sitting in this room, it is our duty to make sure that we don't actually completely lose the ability of this amazing muscle called the brain. And I'm seeing a lot of that, and it scares me a little bit. So I just wanted to leave you with that thought.
In my house, I have our Gen, I have a millennial sitting here, and then I have a Gen Z, and then I have an Gen Alpha, right? And if you talk to my Gen Alpha, he will say everything's AI. Right? Everything's AI. You guys are silly. You know, all these Gen Zs and the millennials are all. But coming back to you, sir, I mean, very quickly, how do you see, you've seen evolution of the air cargo industry. How do you see technology actually trying to create something which is going to give us a resilient supply chain?
I will talk about some specific good news in this line, where technology is going to help us. Normally, X-ray machines have always been created to cover security problems, not safety problems. Just for the purpose of audience clarity, security means a problem artificially created by a human being with intention behind. Whereas safety could be even a stupid problem where I walk and I don't see the wire and I trip down. It could be as simple as that. Rapiscan of UK, Smith and Heinemann, these two companies have worked very hard and they have come to a very advanced level of even being able to identify dangerous goods and not alone explosives which have got problems with the aircraft for, say, security purposes.
Right.
So even safety-wise, they are doing a lot. It is work in progress. It's not a final one, but they have come a very long way. It's a very, very good industry news, I would say there. And those are the things which are going to, again, I would reiterate what Kiran said. That does not mean human being is replaced. Your alertness is always to be complemented along with the help from your machines and your technologies and all.
That's
just an added
I
information.
think it's a very, very, very good point that you raised, that, you know, AI can really help us to probably look at smartly some historic data and analyze where possibly risk could lie. You know? Of course, the interpretation needs to come from us. Very, very fair point. And since you are in under 60 seconds now, Faiz, you have 40 seconds to claim your premium. Tell me, how do you see technology helping us?
Yeah, I think, the use of technology in risk mitigation plays a very, very pivotal role. If you're able to predict the risk better, right, using technology, and that solves a larger part of the problem statement that we have. For example, maybe a cargo which is slightly over-dimensioned, right? Can I predict what would be the best route for that kind of cargo we do transport it? That's point number one. Point number two, if you're talking about shipping lines, obviously I think sir showed an amazing device also, right? We judicially use these kind of services in our kind of business model because it helps at the end of the day predictive analysis in terms of what kind of cargo is most susceptible to what kind of risk. And accordingly we depict and accordingly we predict. That is the kind of model we use. So certainly use of technology help you in catering to larger set of problems getting addressed quickly, which would have taken a slightly elongated time when you talk about the old regime. Right? But certainly I think Kiran also mentioned a very amazing point. We cannot be slaves of technology. Technology has to be calculated and used in the best of the interest so that it solves the larger purpose and not make us the, assumption. It absolutely makes sense.
Great, you made your premium. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Big round of applause to this panel.